Hi everyone, and welcome to our screencast all about cancer. So a few interesting things about cancer. 1 in 3 people will get cancer, and of those 25% of them will die from the disease. It's the leading cause of death, and since the 50s increased by 44% chance. Breast cancer and male colon cancer have increased by 60%. Testes, prostate, kidney cancer have increased by 100%. So cancer is happening a lot more often. Skin cancer, lymphoma, has also increased by over 100%. So a lot of people in the world are getting cancer, and the rates of some types of cancer, especially among industrial workers, are up 10 times higher than in the general population. So if you work in some certain industries that use chemicals like carcinogens, then you have much increased chance of getting cancer. And interestingly enough, children of these workers can get cancer more often as well, especially leukemia. And they found that even when the fathers, especially working with paints, during the mother's pregnancy, the kids can get leukemia. 75% of cancers happen in people over 55, but lately younger people are getting cancer a lot more often, and it's happening at an alarming rate. One example of that is 300% increase in testicular cancer in males aged 25 to 34 since the 50s. That's huge. We'll be talking today about why that's happened. By the end of this unit, you need to be able to describe cancer, list the 7 danger signals that tell us that we might have cancer, be able to differentiate between what a proto-oncogene and an oncogene are, use examples to explain what an initiator and a promoter do to cause cancer, and demonstrate how a virus can cause cancer as well. So here are your vocab words for this unit. Probably quite a few new words, so you need to make sure you know the meaning of all of these words. So cancer is not a disease, it is a condition. And the reason for that is it's usually, now sometimes it's caused by a virus, but not usually caused by a pathogen. It's not, and it doesn't have just one symptom because it happens to different parts of the body. It's also one of the reasons it's really hard to treat. This is one cancer cell, and you can see they're much more spread out. Their shape is not as clearly defined as a normal animal cell. So if you are a normal cell, you grow quite slowly and at a very steady pace. But when a cell is growing really quickly and at an uncontrolled rate, would be really quick, would be once every 3 hours. These cells don't have any time to differentiate and to get specific jobs. Like a heart cell would become a heart cell, a brain cell would become a brain cell. These cells don't have a job, so they're useless. They have no function, but the reason they're dangerous is because they still need food and they still need oxygen, and they steal that away from the rest of the body that's functioning normally. And of course this can cause the death of an organism if it's not treated. 15 to 20% of all of the deaths in North America are due solely just to cancer. You see cells dividing normally, and the genes that control cell division are what are affected when we're talking about cancer. Here is the beginning of a tumor. You'll see these cells all kind of clumping together. That's quite abnormal for a normal cell. Here's another clump of cells indicating a cancerous tumor. How do you get cancer? Well, a normal cell becomes a cancer cell because of some sort of genetic mistake, genetic change, or a mutation. So this mutation can be caused by a mutagen, and we talked in our last screencast that mutagens are usually chemicals or energy like UV rays or gamma rays, and sometimes we call mutagens carcinogens. The second cause of a mutation can be a virus, because a virus can stick itself into a gene wherever it wants to, and when it does that, it can affect the cell's ability to divide properly. Now, different people are more or less susceptible to cancer, and that's a genetic trait. So not all carcinogens cause cancer in people all the time. Depends how susceptible you are. So how does cancer develop? Well, first you have to understand what a normal gene that controls cell division is called, and that normal gene is called a proto-oncogene. And when a proto-oncogene is going along and normally doing its job, what it does is it will either be telling a cell when to divide, or it will be telling a cell when to stop dividing. So there's different proto-oncogenes. But if these proto-oncogenes get mutated, then they will become oncogenes, and an oncogene is a cancer gene. Anytime you see the word onco, they're talking about cancer. Proto-oncogenes, when they're mutated, become oncogenes, cancer genes. So things that can mutate those proto-oncogenes into oncogenes are called initiators. They initiate cancer. And sometimes that mutation that causes cancer is just one single little tiny letter that's been changed or mutated. And initiators can be 4 different things, so we'll discuss those on the next page. Proto-oncogenes are initiated by initiators and turn into oncogenes, cancer genes. So what are the 4 different initiators? Well, a carcinogen is an initiator, and again we're talking radiation, UV rays, chemicals in our environment, for example chemicals in cigarette smoke, the chemicals we put in our food, chemicals we put on our faces and in our bodies. There are a lot of different carcinogens. The second way you can get an oncogene would be, again, if that normal proto-oncogene is mutated in some way, so a deletion, an addition, a substitution, and an inversion. It's just a simple mistake made by the cell and can cause cancer. Next way that you can get cancer is what we call transfection, where pieces of DNA are switching with each other, and that could affect a gene involved in cell division. And of course a virus. Now the viruses that cause cancer we usually call retroviruses, and what they can do is they can actually take an oncogene from somewhere else and stick it into your DNA, causing cancer, or they can stick a piece of DNA right in the middle of a proto-oncogene, and that will mutate it and again cause cancer. Lots of times you need more than one oncogene to work together to cause an actual tumor. So sometimes it takes up to 4 mutations to cause cancer. So oncogenes might not immediately turn into cancer, so we might need another signal to turn on the oncogene, and we call that a promoter. So proto-oncogenes are initiated into oncogenes, and that cancer gene needs to then be further promoted to actually cause cancer. So like I said, sometimes you need 1, 2, 3, and even 4 mutations to actually give you cancerous cells. Once you do have cancer, once that oncogene has been promoted, there's 4 further stages. Neoplasia is the first stage, and neoplasia is just cells just making copy after copy after copy after copy, and these cells have no job. They're not differentiated, so they're not certain specific types of cells, they're just like stem cells still. And what happens is anaplasia, and that's when these cells start piling on top of each other and forming a tumor, just like you see below. The next step will happen is that tumor starts getting hungry, and so vascularization occurs, and what these cells do is they send out hormones that cause all the blood vessels that are close to the tumor to grow blood vessels into the tumor, and that allows the tumor to steal food and oxygen from the body. So blood cells grow out from an artery or a capillary that's close to the tumor and brings oxygen and food towards the tumor. Last step is metastasis. Now you might have heard of cancer cells that have metastasized. What that means is that these cells, they're not very stuck to each other, and so they can very easily break apart from each other, and they spread through either the blood, the circulatory system, or they'll spread through the lymph, through the lymphatic system, and they will move elsewhere in your body and then grow new tumors. And this is stage 4 cancer. Once you've reached this stage of cancer, you have a much less chance of surviving the cancer. Here we've got a cancer cell, and it's leaving the tumor, it's going through the blood system, and it's growing a brand new tumor elsewhere in the body. This tumor has metastasized. Here we see some cancer cells here. Again, they're not stuck to each other very well, which is different from normal cells, and so they can detach from each other and travel. So overall, you have a proto-oncogene that's initiated. It turns into an oncogene. It usually needs to be further promoted into cancer. And once you've got cancer, you start with neoplasia, which is just cells dividing and dividing and dividing, and then they form a tumor, and that tumor is called anaplasia. And the reason they form a tumor is because the cells don't have any contact inhibition, which means when they touch each other, they don't stop growing. And normal cells do have contact inhibition. When they touch each other, they stop growing. But when they don't, you get a tumor. They pile on top of each other. The next step is vascularization, where they send out hormones to grow blood vessels into the tumor. And then, of course, the cells aren't stuck very well to each other, so they can break off and spread through the circulatory or lymphatic system. So how do you know it's a cancer cell? Well, cancer cells have quite a few traits. First of all, they grow much faster and they divide rapidly. Of course, they have mutated DNA in the genes that control cell division in those proto-oncogenes. And again, usually you need more than one mutation to cause cancer. Cancer cells are bigger. In particular, it's the nucleus that's much larger, and the nucleus usually has an irregular or tadpole-like shape. So a cancer cell, the amount of nucleus compared to the cell is quite large. Here's a normal cell with a much smaller nucleus. They also lack differentiation, so just like stem cells, they don't have any jobs, they don't have a function. And they also, like I said earlier, lack contact inhibition because cancer cells don't stop growing when they touch other cells. Normal cells do have contact inhibition, cancer cells do not. Don't stop growing when they touch other cells. Here you've got some cancer cells. They're growing next to each other and they keep growing and they don't stop growing. There's no room, so they start piling on top of each other and that forms a tumor. So the next trait is they do form tumors, which are just masses of cells piled on top of each other. So here's a normal cell versus a cancer cell. You can see the cancer cell's nucleus is much darker, much bigger. Sometimes in one cancer cell there will be more than one nucleus. Here is a picture of a cancer cell. You can see that really big nucleus. Again, if you look at a much smaller level, you see the normal tissue, and the cancer tissue, you can see it's much darker and it's formed some kind of lump or tumor. So here are some cancer cells again. So more characteristics of cancer cells, they don't have cell-to-cell junctions. In other words, they're not stuck to each other very well. Normal cells have these kind of like tunnels between them. Cancer cells don't, so they can get easily dislodged from each other. And of course, cancer cells have the ability to metastasize, to move, travel, and grow into tumors elsewhere. And cancer cells, they will continue to divide even when they're separate from other cancer cells, and they can stimulate the blood vessels that are near them to grow into the tumor, and we know that's called vascularization. Another new word, a new term, is angiogenesis. So the actual growing of the new blood vessels is called angiogenesis. Vascularization is sending a message out to get the blood to grow into you, and angiogenesis is the actual growing of the blood vessels into the tumor. There's two types of tumors, and I'm sure you've heard these words before. The first type is the benign tumor. Benign tumors aren't cancerous. They grow much more slowly. You can see these people have benign tumors on their bodies. They're covered with a capsule, a fibrous capsule, so they don't spread, and they're generally harmless, like a mole or a wart. Malignant tumors, on the other hand, are cancerous tumors. They lack contact inhibition, so they grow into lumps and tumors, and they can travel, they can metastasize. You see this person has got lumps all over his or her lungs. So you've got a benign tumor and a malignant tumor. Malignant tumors spread, benign ones don't. So how do you know what are some signals that you might have cancer? Well, a change in bowel habits or bladder habits, of going to the bathroom is different. That might indicate colon cancer. A sore that doesn't heal, it just stays messy and bloody, that would lead you to perhaps think you might have skin cancer. If you have some sort of unusual bleeding or discharge from different parts of your body, again, that might lead to colon cancer or some other cancers. If you have a lump anywhere in your body, particularly in the breast, that might lead you to think you had breast cancer. If you have a really hard time swallowing or you're having indigestion, it could be throat cancer if you're having problems swallowing, or maybe colon cancer, stomach cancer. If you have an obvious change in a wart or a mole, you should check it out. It might be skin cancer. If you have a nagging cough or you're really hoarse all the time, it could be lung cancer or throat cancer. Make sure you know those. And again, we talked that there might be a genetic predisposition to getting cancer, so some families are more likely to get cancer than others. If a close family member has had a type of cancer, you'll probably be more likely to get it, although that's not always true. A classic example of that is with breast cancer. They found two genes in the 90s called BRCA1 and BRCA2, and if you've got a mutation in either these two genes or both, you're actually 80% more likely to get breast cancer. So make sure you come to class next day and we'll talk all about the risks you should avoid so you don't get cancer. And don't forget to bring all those hot questions.